The moment I heard Patricia Rodriguez collapse behind me during my wedding vows, I knew something was wrong. Not because she was having a heart attack, but because after 3 years of nursing school and 2 years working in the ER at Riverside General, I could tell the difference between real distress and theatrical performance. The gasping was too dramatic, the timing too perfect, and the way she made sure to grab onto the white silk runner as she fell was pure calculation. What I didn't know was that her fake emergency would expose something far more sinister than just her desperate need for attention. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, everything had seemed perfect. Michael and I had been planning our dream wedding at Sunset Gardens Country Club for over a year. The venue was stunning, nestled in the hills overlooking Riverside with sprawling gardens that bloomed in vibrant colors throughout the summer. We had chosen December 15th as our date, wanting a winter wonderland theme that would blend both my Chinese heritage with Michael's Mexican traditions. The planning had been meticulous, every detail carefully coordinated with our wedding planner Lisa Martinez. From the red and gold accents honoring my family's customs to the mariachi band that would surprise Michael's relatives during the reception. I should have known Patricia would find a way to make it about herself. From the moment Michael proposed to me 2 years ago, his mother had made it clear that no woman would ever be good enough for her precious son. It started with small comments about my career choice, suggesting that nursing wasn't prestigious enough for a Rodriguez family member. Then came the passive-aggressive remarks about our cultural differences, how she worried our children wouldn't understand their Mexican heritage properly. Michael always defended me, but I could see the strain it put on him, caught between the woman who raised him and the woman he wanted to spend his life with. The morning of our wedding, I woke up in the bridal suite at Sunset Gardens, feeling like I was floating on air. The December morning was crisp and clear, with just enough winter sunshine streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows to make everything feel magical. Jessica, my maid of honor and younger sister, was already up arranging the bouquets while my mother Maria fussed over the traditional Chinese tea ceremony elements we planned to incorporate before the Western ceremony. The room smelled like jasmine and roses, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. That peace lasted exactly until Patricia knocked on the bridal suite door. She entered without waiting for permission, dressed in a cream-colored dress that was suspiciously close to white, her perfectly styled hair and professional makeup making it clear she intended to photograph well. Behind her trailed Emma, Michael's 22-year-old sister, who shot me an apologetic look that immediately put me on edge. "Sarah, darling," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I just wanted to have a little chat before the ceremony. You know, mother-in-law to daughter-in-law." The way she emphasized the word daughter-in-law made it sound like a disease she was trying not to catch. My mother and Jessica exchanged glances, sensing the tension that immediately filled the room. "Mrs. Rodriguez," I replied carefully. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Patricia settled herself onto the white velvet settee, as if she owned the place, smoothing her dress with deliberate precision. "Well, I've been thinking about this whole affair, and I have to say, I'm concerned about the message we're sending to our families and friends." "What message would that be?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. "This whole production," she gestured vaguely around the elegantly decorated suite. "It's just so extravagant, so flashy. The Rodriguez family has always valued humility and tradition, simple church ceremonies, family gatherings at home. This country club spectacle, these fusion elements mixing cultures that don't really blend. I worry people will think Michael has forgotten where he comes from." The words hit me like a physical blow. We had spent months carefully planning ways to honor both our families, researching traditions and finding meaningful ways to blend our backgrounds. Every decision had been made with love and respect for both cultures. To hear her dismiss it all as a spectacle felt like she was dismissing our entire relationship. "Patricia," my mother interjected, her voice carefully controlled, "Sarah and Michael have put a lot of thought into creating a ceremony that honors both families." "Oh, I'm sure they have," Patricia replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But intention and execution are two different things, aren't they? I just think perhaps we should consider postponing the ceremony. Just until we can plan something more." Appropriate. The room went silent. Even Emma looked shocked at her mother's audacity. Postpone? I repeated, certain I had misheard. Just temporarily, Patricia continued, as if she was being perfectly reasonable. Give us time to plan something that really represents what marriage means to our family. Something in our parish church Father Miguel could officiate. We could have the reception in the church hall. Much more meaningful, don't you think? I stared at her, my mind racing. The guests would start arriving in 3 hours. Father Murphy was already on site preparing for the ceremony. The catering staff was setting up for a reception that would host 200 people. The musicians were doing their sound checks, and she wanted me to postpone, because our wedding wasn't humble enough for her taste. Mrs. Rodriguez, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. With respect, Michael and I are getting married today. We've planned this for over a year. Our families have traveled from across the country, and this is what we both want. Patricia's expression hardened, the false warmth disappearing entirely. I see. Well, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude I was worried about. She stood up, smoothing her dress again. I just hope Michael realizes what kind of family he's marrying into before it's too late. The insult hung in the air like poison. My mother's face flushed with anger. Jessica looked ready to physically remove Patricia from the room, and even sweet Emma seemed mortified by her mother's behavior. But before anyone could respond, Patricia was already heading for the door. I'll see you at the ceremony, she said over her shoulder, her tone making it sound more like a threat than a promise. Assuming it goes forward as planned. After she left, the room erupted in indignant whispers. My mother wanted to march straight to Michael and demand he set his mother straight. Jessica suggested we ban Patricia from the ceremony entirely. But I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't just pre-wedding jitters or cold feet from a protective mother. This felt calculated, deliberate. Like the opening move in a game I didn't even know we were playing. Sarah, Emma said quietly, having lingered behind while the others debated. I'm so sorry. I tried to talk her out of coming up here, but she insisted. She's been different lately, more controlling than usual. I looked at Michael's sister, seeing genuine distress in her eyes. Different how? Emma glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. She's been obsessing over this wedding for months. Not in a good way. She keeps talking about how Michael is making a mistake, how your family is trying to change him. She's convinced herself that if the wedding doesn't happen, he'll somehow come to his senses. A chill ran down my spine. Come to his senses about what? About marrying you. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Sarah, I think she's planning something. I don't know what. But the way she's been acting, the things she's been saying to Dad when she thinks I'm not listening. I'm worried she's going to try to sabotage the ceremony. Before I could respond, there was another knock on the door. This time it was Lisa, our wedding planner, her usually calm demeanor showing cracks of stress. Sarah, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a small situation with the ceremony setup. Mrs. Rodriguez has been making suggestions to the staff about changes to the decorations. She seems to think there's been some kind of miscommunication about the cultural elements. I closed my eyes, feeling the first real wave of panic wash over me. Of course she wasn't done. The conversation in the bridal suite had just been the opening act. What kind of suggestions? She's asking the staff to remove the Chinese decorations and replace them with more traditional Catholic elements. She says there's been a mistake with the ceremony planning. The florists are confused because they're getting different instructions from what we originally discussed. My mother stood up so quickly her chair nearly toppled over. That woman has lost her mind if she thinks she can redesign our daughter's wedding 3 hours before the ceremony. I'll handle it, I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. Inside, I was a storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, disbelief, and a growing determination that Patricia Rodriguez was not going to ruin the most important day of my life. I spent the next hour racing around the venue, correcting Patricia's suggestions, and reassuring confused vendors that the original plans were still in effect. The florists had to redo 2 arrangements that had been changed. The musicians needed confirmation about which processional music to use. Even the catering staff had been told that we were switching from our carefully planned fusion menu to traditional Mexican dishes only. Each correction felt like a small war, and I found myself wondering if this was what marriage to Michael would be like, constantly fighting his mother's attempts to control our lives. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered why I fell in love with him in the first place. Michael was kind, intelligent, and genuinely supportive of my career and dreams. He made me laugh when I came home exhausted from 12-hour shifts at the hospital. He had learned to make my grandmother's dumplings just to surprise me on my birthday. He deserved better than a mother who would sabotage his wedding to maintain control over his life. As I returned to the bridal suite to finish getting ready, I caught a glimpse of Patricia near the ceremony area, talking intensely with David, Michael's father. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in their body language. David kept shaking his head while Patricia gestured emphatically, clearly trying to convince him of something. Whatever she was planning, it was bigger than just changing decorations. "Everything okay?" Jessica asked as I re-entered the suite. The makeup artist was waiting patiently to do final touch-ups, and my wedding dress hung perfectly pressed and ready. "It will be," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Patricia's just being Patricia. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting the delicate veil that had belonged to my grandmother, I made a decision. Whatever Patricia Rodriguez was planning, I was ready for it. I had worked too hard and come too far to let anyone sabotage my happiness. I was a nurse who had saved lives in emergency situations, who had stayed calm under pressure when everything around me was chaos. One manipulative mother-in-law wasn't going to break me. The ceremony was set to begin in 30 minutes. Guests were arriving, the musicians were in position, and Father Murphy was reviewing his notes one final time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Michael was in the groom's quarters getting ready with his groomsmen, probably unaware of his mother's mourning campaign to undermine our wedding. In just half an hour, we would walk down the aisle and promise to love each other for the rest of our lives. I had no idea that Patricia's real plan was just beginning, and that her fake heart attack would expose secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about the Rodriguez family. But as I took one last look in the mirror before heading to the ceremony, I felt strong and ready for whatever came next. After all, I was about to become Sarah Rodriguez, and nobody, not even my future mother-in-law, was going to stop me from claiming the happiness I deserved. The music began just as the December sun reached its peak, casting golden light through the tall windows of Sunset Gardens Ceremony Hall. I stood at the back of the aisle, my arm linked with my father's, watching as our guests rose to their feet. The space looked absolutely beautiful, despite Patricia's morning sabotage attempts. Red and gold silk ribbons intertwined with white roses along the chair backs, honoring both our cultures in the exact way Michael and I had envisioned. Emma walked down the aisle first as my bridesmaid, her burgundy dress complementing the winter theme perfectly. She caught my eye and gave me an encouraging smile that helped calm my nerves. Jessica followed as my maid of honor, practically glowing with pride and joy. As the music shifted to the traditional wedding march, I took my first step down the aisle, feeling like everything was finally falling into place. Michael stood at the altar looking absolutely handsome in his charcoal gray tuxedo, his face lighting up the moment he saw me. His best man Jake stood beside him, along with his cousin Carlos, who had flown in from Phoenix specifically for our wedding. But as my eyes swept across the wedding party, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. Patricia was seated in the front row, but instead of the proud, emotional expression most mothers wear during their son's wedding, she looked almost calculating. Her eyes weren't on Michael or me, but kept darting around the room as if she was timing something. David sat beside her, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with anyone. I remembered the intense conversation I had witnessed between them earlier, and wondered what exactly Patricia had been trying to convince him to do. Whatever it was, David clearly wasn't comfortable with it, but he also wasn't doing anything to stop it. As I reached the altar and my father placed my hand in Michael's, I felt a moment of pure happiness. This was it. This was what we had planned and dreamed about for so long. Father Murphy smiled warmly at both of us as we took our positions, and for a few precious minutes, it felt like nothing could go wrong. "Dearly beloved," Father Murphy began, his voice carrying clearly through the ceremony hall, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Sarah Chen and Michael Rodriguez in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred bond, a partnership built on love, trust, and mutual respect." I squeezed Michael's hands, feeling the weight of his grandmother's ring on my finger, the one he had proposed with 2 years ago. He squeezed back, his eyes never leaving mine. This was what mattered. Not Patricia's disapproval, not the morning's drama, not whatever scheme she might still be plotting. Just Michael and me, making a promise to build a life together. "If anyone has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace," Father Murphy continued with the traditional words. The silence that followed should have been peaceful, but I noticed Patricia shifting in her seat. She cleared her throat softly, and I felt my heart rate spike. Surely she wouldn't actually object during the ceremony itself. That would be too much, even for her. Father Murphy waited the traditional moment, then smiled and continued. "Very well. Sarah and Michael have written their own vows, which they will now share with us. Michael, you may begin." Michael turned to face me fully, pulling out a folded piece of paper with hands that trembled slightly. "Sarah," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "3 years ago, you literally saved my life when I came into the emergency room with what I thought was just a bad case of food poisoning. You were the nurse who caught that my symptoms pointed to appendicitis, not indigestion. But more than that, you saved my life in every way that matters." I felt tears starting to form as he continued. "You've taught me what it means to be truly partnered with someone. You support my dreams of teaching while pursuing your own goals in medicine. You've learned Spanish to talk with my grandmother, and you make the best dumplings this side of Chinatown. You make me want to be a better man every single day." He paused, his voice catching slightly. "I promise to support your career, even when it means 12-hour shifts and missed dinners. I promise to stand up for us, for our choices, for our family. I promise to love your family as my own, and I hope mine will learn to love you the way you deserve to be loved." That last line was clearly directed at his mother, though he didn't look in her direction. I saw Patricia's jaw tighten, her disapproval practically radiating from the front row. "Sarah Chen," Michael concluded, "I promise to love you through every challenge, every triumph, and every ordinary Tuesday for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" Through my tears, I managed to say, "I will," and heard our guests chuckle warmly at the informal addition to the traditional ceremony. It was my turn now, and I had spent weeks perfecting my vows. "Michael Rodriguez," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "You asked me on our first date if I believed in soulmates. I told you I was too practical for that kind of romantic nonsense. I was wrong." Michael grinned, remembering that conversation as clearly as I did. "You are my soulmate, my partner, my best friend, and the person I want to face every challenge with. You've never once made me feel like I had to choose between loving you and pursuing my career. You've celebrated every promotion, every achievement, every small victory as if it was your own." I looked directly at Patricia as I continued, my voice clear and firm. "I promise to build a family with you based on love and respect, not control or manipulation. I promise to honor both our backgrounds while creating our own traditions. I promise to stand by you no matter what obstacles we face, no matter who tries to come between us." Patricia's face had gone pale, clearly understanding that my words were at least partially directed at her. But I wasn't done. "I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who you inspire me to be. I promise to be your partner, in every sense of the word, sharing the burdens and the joys equally. Michael Rodriguez, you are my choice, today and every day after. Will you marry me?" "I will," he said, without hesitation, and I saw several people in the audience dabbing at their eyes. Father Murphy smiled broadly. "Now we will exchange rings as a symbol of the unbroken circle of love and commitment." Michael took my left hand, sliding the simple white gold band next to my engagement ring. "Sarah, with this ring I thee wed." I took his hand, surprised to find it was steadier than mine, as I slipped his ring into place. "Michael, with this ring I thee wed. By the power vested in me by the state of California," Father Murphy announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Michael, you may kiss your bride." As Michael lifted my veil and leaned in to kiss me, I felt a moment of pure, perfect happiness. We had done it. We were married. Whatever Patricia had been planning, she had missed her chance. The ceremony was complete, and nothing could change that now. Michael's lips met mine in a kiss that was both tender and triumphant, and our guests erupted in applause and cheers. As we broke apart, both grinning widely, I caught sight of my parents in the second row, my mother crying happy tears, while my father beamed with pride. Jessica was practically bouncing with excitement, and even some of Michael's relatives looked genuinely moved by the ceremony. But as we turned to walk back down the aisle as husband and wife, that's when it happened. "Oh!" Patricia gasped loudly from the front row. "Oh! My chest!" The sound cut through the celebration like a blade. All heads turned toward her as she clutched at her chest dramatically, her face contorting in what was supposed to look like pain. I can't breathe." David immediately reached for her, looking panicked. "Patricia, what's wrong?" "My heart," she gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Something's wrong with my heart." The timing was so perfect, so calculated, that I felt a surge of anger rather than concern. We had literally just been pronounced husband and wife, hadn't even made it back down the aisle, and now she was having a convenient medical emergency that would overshadow our entire wedding. But my nursing training kicked in despite my suspicions. Even if this was an act, I couldn't take the chance that it wasn't. I immediately moved toward her, Michael right behind me. "Patricia, I need you to describe what you're feeling," I said, dropping into my professional mode as I knelt beside her chair. "Sharp pain," she wheezed, still clutching her chest. "Like someone squeezing my heart. I can't. Oh God, I think I'm having a heart attack." The words sent a ripple of alarm through our guests. Several people were already pulling out their phones to call 911. Father Murphy looked stricken, probably wondering if he should start administering last rites. Emma had gone completely white, staring at her mother in shock. "Has anyone called an ambulance?" Michael asked, his voice tight with worry despite everything his mother had put us through. "I did," called out my uncle from the back of the room. "They're on their way." I knelt beside Patricia, checking her pulse and observing her symptoms with the clinical eye I had developed through years of emergency medicine. Her pulse was elevated, but not in the way I would expect from someone having a cardiac event. Her breathing was labored, but again, the pattern seemed off. Most telling was the way she kept glancing around to make sure everyone was watching her performance. "Patricia, I need you to rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10, I said, following standard protocol while trying to assess whether this was real. 10, she gasped immediately. "Definitely a 10. The worst pain I've ever felt." That was another red flag. Most real cardiac patients couldn't speak clearly enough to answer questions that quickly. And they rarely claimed maximum pain levels so definitively. But with dozens of wedding guests watching and Michael looking increasingly worried, I had to treat this as if it were genuine. "Let's get her lying down," I instructed, and several people helped move Patricia from her chair to the floor of the ceremony hall. "Does anyone have any aspirin?" My mother immediately dug through her purse and produced a small bottle. I gave Patricia a baby aspirin to chew, standard protocol for suspected heart attacks, though I noticed she seemed reluctant to take it. "The ambulance should be here soon," David said, his voice shaking. Whether from worry about his wife or knowledge of what she was really doing, I couldn't tell. As we waited, I continued monitoring Patricia's vital signs and symptoms. Everything about her presentation felt wrong to my trained senses. The timing, the symptoms, the way she kept making sure she was the center of attention. But, with our wedding guests watching, including several elderly relatives who looked genuinely terrified, I couldn't exactly announce my suspicions. Michael knelt beside me, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked quietly. "The paramedics will be able to tell us more," I replied diplomatically, not wanting to voice my doubts where Patricia could hear them. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, their sirens cutting through what should have been our wedding celebration. EMT Dr. Amanda Brooks, whom I recognized from my shifts at Riverside General, entered with her partner and immediately took charge of the situation. "What do we have?" Dr. Brooks asked as she knelt beside Patricia. 58-year-old female, complaint of severe chest pain, possible cardiac event, I reported, slipping easily into medical terminology. Patient rates pain as 10 out of 10, administered 1 baby aspirin at onset of symptoms. Dr. Brooks nodded, immediately beginning her assessment. As she worked, taking vital signs and asking Patricia detailed questions about her symptoms, I watched carefully. Patricia's answers continued to be too quick, too definitive. Real cardiac patients were usually more confused, more focused on their internal sensations than on how they appeared to others. "We're going to transport you to Riverside General for evaluation," Dr. Brooks announced after completing her initial assessment. "The EKG is showing some irregularities that we want the cardiologist to examine." As they loaded Patricia onto the stretcher, she made sure to catch my eye. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice weak but somehow still managing to sound accusatory, "I'm so sorry this happened during your special day." The words were perfect, designed to make me look heartless if I showed anything other than complete concern. "Don't worry about that now," I replied, though every instinct I had was screaming that this entire scene was orchestrated. Michael climbed into the ambulance with his mother, leaving me standing in my wedding dress in the ceremony hall, surrounded by confused and worried guests. Our photographer was still taking pictures, though now they documented a medical emergency rather than a celebration. The reception dinner was waiting in the ballroom next door, but clearly, nobody knew what to do. Lisa, our wedding planner, approached me with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. What would you like me to tell the catering staff? Should we delay the reception?" I looked around at our guests, many of whom had traveled long distances to be here. The elderly relatives looked shaken, the younger guests seemed confused, and everyone was looking at me expectantly, waiting for direction. "We're going to the hospital," I announced to the room. "Anyone who wants to come is welcome. We'll figure out the reception later." As I gathered my dress to head to the parking lot, Jessica caught my arm. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" Something about that whole scene felt... "I know," I said quietly, "but we have to play this out. If she's really having a heart attack, I need to be there. And if she's not..." I left the sentence hanging, but Jessica understood. "If she's not, then we're gonna find out exactly what game she's playing." The drive to Riverside General felt surreal. Here I was, still in my wedding dress and veil, racing to the hospital where I worked to check on my mother-in-law, who may or may not have sabotaged my wedding with a fake heart attack. As we pulled into the parking lot, I wondered what exactly I would find when I got inside. I had no idea that Patricia's deception was about to expose something far more serious than just her desperate need for attention. The paramedics had indeed found something else. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about the Rodriguez family and give me the ammunition I needed to finally fight back against Patricia's manipulation. But first, I had to get through what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, now turned into a medical drama that felt more like a soap opera than reality. The emergency room at Riverside General was buzzing with its usual controlled chaos when I arrived, still wearing my wedding dress. The charge nurse, Maria Gonzalez, did a double take when she saw me, her eyes widening as she took in my veil and formal attire. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be at your wedding?" Maria asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Long story," I replied, gathering up the train of my dress as I navigated through the familiar hallways. "My mother-in-law had a cardiac episode during the ceremony. Dr. Brooks brought her in about 20 minutes ago." Maria's expression shifted to professional concern. "Patricia Rodriguez? She's in room 3. Dr. Patel is running tests now. Your husband is in the family waiting area." I thanked her and headed toward room 3, my heels clicking against the polished floor. As I passed the nurse's station, several colleagues looked up in surprise, some whispering among themselves about why the bride was in the emergency room on her wedding day. Under different circumstances, I might have found their reactions amusing, but right now I had more pressing concerns. Through the glass window of room 3, I could see Patricia lying on the hospital bed, connected to various monitors. Dr. Raj Patel, one of the cardiologists I had worked with many times, was reviewing what appeared to be EKG results. Patricia looked pale but alert, her eyes darting around the room with an alertness that seemed inconsistent with someone who had just experienced a major cardiac event. I knocked softly and entered the room. Dr. Patel looked up and smiled when he saw me, though his expression was puzzled by my wedding attire. "Sarah, congratulations on your marriage," he said warmly, "though I have to say, this is not how I expected to see you on your wedding day." "Thank you, Dr. Patel. How is she doing?" I asked, moving to Patricia's bedside with genuine professional concern, despite my personal reservations. "Well, that's interesting," Dr. Patel said, glancing at his tablet. "The initial EKG that Dr. Brooks ran in the field showed some irregularities, which is why we brought her in for further evaluation. However, the subsequent tests we've run here tell a different story." Patricia's eyes sharpened with what looked like anxiety, though she tried to maintain her expression of someone in distress. "What do you mean, doctor? I'm still having chest pain." Dr. Patel consulted his notes again. "Mrs. Rodriguez, your cardiac enzymes are completely normal. Your EKG is now showing a regular rhythm, and your vital signs have stabilized. These are not typically the patterns we see with actual myocardial infarction." I felt a mixture of vindication and concern. My nursing instincts had been correct about the symptoms seeming off, but now I was curious about what had caused the initial EKG irregularities that Dr. Brooks had detected. "Sometimes stress can cause symptoms that mimic cardiac events," Dr. Patel continued diplomatically. "However, we did find something else during our examination that concerns me." Patricia's face went completely white, a reaction that seemed far more genuine than any of her previous expressions of pain. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Patel looked uncomfortable, glancing between Patricia and me. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to ask you about your current medications. Can you tell me what you're currently taking?" "Just my blood pressure medication," Patricia replied quickly. "And some vitamins." "Nothing else." Dr. Patel frowned, consulting his tablet again. "That's not consistent with our blood work. We're showing elevated levels of several prescription medications in your system. Medications that, when combined, could certainly cause cardiac symptoms and EKG irregularities." The room went silent except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. I watched Patricia's face carefully, my nursing training allowing me to recognize the signs of someone who had been caught in a lie. Her breathing pattern changed, her pupils dilated slightly, and she began fidgeting with the hospital blanket. "I don't understand," Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "What medications are you talking about?" Dr. Patel looked genuinely troubled now. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we're detecting therapeutic levels of lorazepam, hydrocodone, and zolpidem in your blood work. These medications, when taken together, can cause significant cardiovascular stress, especially if they're not prescribed to you or if you're not taking them under medical supervision." My stomach dropped as the implications became clear. Lorazepam was an anti-anxiety medication, hydrocodone was a powerful pain reliever, and zolpidem was a sleep aid. The combination could indeed cause the symptoms Patricia had displayed, but more importantly, these were all controlled substances that required prescriptions. "Are these medications prescribed to you?" Dr. Patel asked directly. Patricia's silence was telling. She looked away, unable to meet either of our eyes, and I saw her hands trembling slightly under the hospital blanket. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Dr. Patel continued gently but firmly, "I need to be direct with you. The levels we're detecting suggest regular use of these medications over time, not a one-time incident. If these aren't prescribed to you, I'm legally obligated to report this to the appropriate authorities." "They're not illegal," Patricia said defensively, finally speaking up. "I mean, they're prescription medications. It's not like I'm using street drugs." "But are they prescribed to you?" I asked, my voice calm but insistent. As a nurse, I had seen plenty of prescription drug abuse, and I knew exactly how serious this situation was. Patricia's defiance crumbled, and she began to cry, not the theatrical tears she had displayed during her fake heart attack, but genuine tears of someone who had been caught doing something she knew was wrong. "I just needed help sleeping," she said through her tears. After David's heart attack last year, I was so anxious all the time. The doctor gave me a small prescription for anxiety, but it wasn't enough. My friend Linda had some extra pills from her surgery, and she said they helped her relax. Dr. Patel and I exchanged glances. This was a common story, but it didn't make the situation any less serious. "How long has this been going on?" Dr. Patel asked. "Maybe 6 months," Patricia admitted, "but it's not like I'm an addict or anything. I just take them when I need to sleep or when I'm feeling overwhelmed." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Dr. Patel said carefully, "taking unprescribed controlled substances is illegal, regardless of how you obtain them. More importantly, the combination you've been taking is dangerous. You could have had a genuine cardiac event." I was processing this information rapidly, my mind racing through the implications. Patricia's behavior over the past few months suddenly made more sense. The increased paranoia about the wedding, the erratic decision-making, the dramatic mood swings, these were all consistent with someone abusing prescription medications. "Patricia," I said softly, "is this why you were so upset about the wedding? Were you taking these medications this morning?" She nodded miserably. "I was so nervous about the ceremony, about everything changing. I took a little extra to calm down, but then I started feeling strange during the service. My heart was racing, and I felt dizzy. I thought maybe if I could get some attention, get Michael to focus on me instead of the wedding." The truth was finally coming out. Patricia's heart attack had been partially real, in the sense that the medications she had taken were genuinely affecting her cardiovascular system. But it had also been an opportunity to disrupt our wedding and get Michael's attention. Dr. Patel excused himself to make some phone calls, leaving Patricia and me alone in the room. The monitors continued their steady beeping, and I could hear the familiar sounds of the emergency room beyond the door. Under normal circumstances, I would be here as a nurse, helping with other patients. Instead, I was here as a bride, trying to understand why my mother-in-law had sabotaged what should have been the happiest day of my life. "I suppose you're happy now," Patricia said bitterly, not looking at me. "You've got something to hold over me." "Actually, Patricia, I'm not happy at all," I replied honestly. "I'm concerned about you, and I'm angry about what this has done to Michael. But mostly, I'm trying to understand why you hate me so much that you would risk your health and ruin our wedding just to cause problems." Patricia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defeated. "I don't hate you, Sarah. I'm afraid of you." "Afraid of me? Why?" "Because you're everything I never was," she said, finally looking at me. "You're educated, successful, independent. You don't need Michael to take care of you, and that terrifies me because it means he might not need me anymore either." I sat down in the chair beside her bed, my wedding dress rustling around me. This conversation was not one I had ever expected to have, especially not on my wedding day while wearing my veil in a hospital room. "Patricia, Michael loving me doesn't mean he stops loving you. That's not how love works." "But it changes things," she insisted. "You'll influence him, change his priorities. He already defends you when I express concerns. What happens when you start having children? Will there be room for his family in his life?" I could see the genuine fear in her eyes, and for the first time, I began to understand that her behavior wasn't just malicious. It was the desperate actions of someone who felt like she was losing control of the most important relationship in her life. "Patricia, I've never wanted to take Michael away from his family. I've tried to include you in our plans, to respect your traditions while also honoring my own. But you've fought me every step of the way, because I was scared," she admitted, "and the pills made everything seem worse, more dramatic. I would lie awake at night imagining scenarios where Michael chose you over his family, where I became irrelevant in his life." Dr. Patel returned with what looked like social services paperwork and a serious expression. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I've spoken with our social worker and consulted with the psychiatric department. Given the nature of your medication use and the potential risks involved, we're going to need to discuss treatment options." Patricia looked panicked. "Treatment? But I'm fine now. The heart symptoms have stopped. The cardiac symptoms may have resolved, but the underlying issue hasn't," Dr. Patel explained gently. "Prescription drug abuse is a serious medical condition that requires proper treatment. We can arrange for outpatient counseling and medication management, but this isn't something that can be ignored. At that moment, Michael appeared in the doorway, his tuxedo jacket removed and his face showing the strain of the day's events. Behind him were David, Emma, and Jessica, all looking worried and confused. "How is she?" Michael asked immediately, moving to his mother's bedside. Dr. Patel looked at Patricia, clearly giving her the opportunity to explain the situation to her family herself. When she remained silent, he spoke up. "Mr. Rodriguez, your mother is medically stable, but we've discovered some issues that need to be addressed. Perhaps it would be best if we discussed this as a family." Over the next hour, the truth came out in painful, halting admissions. Patricia explained about the prescription medications, the anxiety that had been building for months, and how the combination had led to both her genuine physical symptoms and her decision to turn those symptoms into a dramatic scene during our wedding. Michael was devastated. David looked stunned, admitting that he had noticed changes in Patricia's behavior but had attributed them to stress about the wedding. Emma was angry, realizing that her mother's erratic behavior had been affecting the entire family for months. "Mom, how could you do this?" Michael asked, his voice breaking. "Today was supposed to be about Sarah and me starting our life together, and you turned it into this." "I was trying to protect our family," Patricia said weakly, but even she seemed to realize how hollow that sounded. "By taking drugs that weren't prescribed to you? By faking a heart attack during my wedding ceremony?" Michael's voice was rising, and I could see how much this was hurting him. "It wasn't entirely fake," Patricia protested. "I was really feeling sick. The medications were making my heart race, and I was dizzy. I just amplified it when I realized it was happening during the ceremony." The room fell silent as everyone processed this admission. Even with all my suspicions, hearing Patricia confirm that she had deliberately turned a medical issue into a dramatic scene during our wedding was shocking. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. "The important thing now is getting Mrs. Rodriguez the help she needs. We can arrange for an outpatient treatment program that will address both the medication dependence and the underlying anxiety issues. But this will require family support and Mrs. Rodriguez's commitment to the treatment process." As the medical and psychological implications of the situation were discussed, I found myself thinking about what this meant for Michael and me. Our wedding day had been completely derailed, our reception was sitting untouched at Sunset Gardens, and our families were dealing with a crisis that none of us had seen coming. But strangely, I also felt a sense of relief. Patricia's actions had finally been exposed for what they were, and her admission about being afraid of losing Michael's love gave me hope that we might eventually be able to work through our issues. More importantly, Michael had seen firsthand how his mother's behavior was affecting our relationship, and he was clearly ready to set boundaries. "Sarah," Michael said quietly, taking my hand as the medical team discussed treatment options with his parents. "I'm so sorry about all of this. I know this isn't how you wanted to spend our wedding day." I looked at my new husband, still wearing his tuxedo pants and white dress shirt, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it in stress. We were supposed to be cutting our wedding cake right now, dancing to our first song as husband and wife, celebrating with our friends and family. Instead, we were in a hospital room, dealing with prescription drug abuse and family dysfunction. "Michael, we're married," I said, holding up my left hand to show the wedding ring alongside my engagement ring. That happened. Patricia couldn't stop that, no matter what she did. Everything else is just details that we can figure out together. He squeezed my hand, and I saw some of the tension leave his shoulders. "I love you, Mrs. Rodriguez." "I love you too, Mr. Rodriguez." As we sat there in the hospital room, still in our wedding attire, I realized that this crisis had actually accomplished something important. Patricia's deception had been exposed, the family was finally dealing with her manipulative behavior, and Michael and I were facing our first real challenge as a married couple with a united front. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Patricia would need treatment, the family would have to learn new ways of relating to each other, and Michael and I would have to establish boundaries that protected our marriage while still maintaining family relationships. But for the first time since I had met Patricia Rodriguez, I felt like we had a chance to build something healthy. Outside the hospital room window, the December sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Our wedding reception was officially over, our guests had probably gone home, and our honeymoon would likely be delayed while we dealt with this family crisis. But we were married, we had survived our first major test as a couple, and I was beginning to understand that sometimes the most important victories come from the battles you never expected to fight. Dr. Patel was arranging for Patricia's discharge with a comprehensive treatment plan, and I knew that the real work of healing this family was just beginning. But as I sat there holding Michael's hand, both of us still dressed for the wedding that had been interrupted but not ruined, I felt confident that we could handle whatever came next. After all, we had promised to face every challenge together, for better or for worse. We just hadn't expected to start keeping that promise quite so soon. 3 weeks after our hospital wedding day, I walked into the family therapy session at Riverside Wellness Center with a confidence I had never felt before around Patricia Rodriguez. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of rescheduled honeymoon plans, insurance claims for the disrupted reception, and family meetings about Patricia's treatment program. But more importantly, they had been 3 weeks of Michael and me establishing ourselves as a united front, something that Patricia was slowly learning to respect. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the family therapist, had been working with the Rodriguez family since Patricia's discharge from the hospital. Today was the first session that included me, and I had spent considerable time preparing for what I wanted to accomplish. Patricia's prescription drug abuse had been the catalyst, but the underlying family dynamics needed to be addressed if we were going to move forward in a healthy way. Patricia sat across from me in the comfortable office, looking smaller and more subdued than I had ever seen her. The past 3 weeks of supervised withdrawal from the unprescribed medications had been difficult, and she was attending daily counseling sessions in addition to these family meetings. David sat beside her, looking tired but more present than he had in months. Michael took the seat next to me, his hand finding mine in a gesture of support that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "Sarah, thank you for joining us today," Dr. Walsh began. "Patricia has been working hard to understand the behaviors that led to the wedding incident, and she's asked for this opportunity to speak with you directly." I nodded, my nursing background helping me maintain a professional demeanor despite the personal nature of the situation. "I appreciate that, Dr. Walsh. I'm hoping we can find a way to move forward that works for everyone." Patricia cleared her throat nervously, her hands fidgeting with the tissue box that Dr. Walsh kept strategically placed on the coffee table. "Sarah, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond what happened at your wedding. I've spent the past 3 weeks in therapy examining my behavior, and I'm horrified by what I've put you and Michael through." I waited, wanting to hear what she had to say before responding. This was Patricia's moment to take responsibility, and I wasn't going to make it easier for her by jumping in with reassurances. "Dr. Walsh has helped me understand that my actions weren't really about you," Patricia continued, her voice growing stronger. "They were about my own fears and insecurities, and I was using the prescription medications to cope with anxiety I should have been addressing in healthy ways." "What specifically are you apologizing for?" I asked, my voice calm but direct. Dr. Walsh had coached me to be specific in these conversations, not to let generalities cover up the actual harm that had been done. Patricia took a deep breath. "I'm apologizing for trying to sabotage your wedding from the moment you started planning it. I'm apologizing for the racist comments about your heritage and the disrespectful things I said about your career. I'm apologizing for deliberately trying to undermine your relationship with Michael. And I'm apologizing for turning what should have been your special day into a medical emergency." Michael squeezed my hand, and I could see the relief in his eyes. These were things he had tried to address with his mother for months, but she had always denied or minimized them. Hearing her take full responsibility was clearly meaningful to him. "I'm also apologizing," Patricia continued, "for putting you in the position of having to be my nurse on your wedding day. That was completely unfair, and it shows how selfishly I was thinking about everything." "Thank you for that apology," I said carefully. "I appreciate your honesty about what happened. What I need to know now is what you're planning to do differently going forward." Dr. Walsh leaned forward slightly. "Patricia has been working on developing new coping strategies and establishing boundaries for herself. Would you like to share some of those with Sarah?" Patricia nodded, consulting a small notebook she had been writing in during therapy. First, I'm committing to staying in treatment for my anxiety without using unprescribed medications. I'm learning healthier ways to deal with stress and change. Second, I'm going to respect your marriage by not interfering in decisions that you and Michael make together. And third, I want to learn about your culture and background instead of dismissing them. These were significant commitments, and I could see that Patricia was sincere about them. However, my 3 years of nursing had taught me that good intentions weren't always enough to change deeply ingrained patterns of behavior. Those are important steps, I acknowledged. I also think we need to discuss what happens if you slip back into old patterns. What accountability measures are you willing to accept? Patricia looked uncomfortable, but Dr. Walsh encouraged her to answer. What do you mean by accountability measures? I mean consequences, I said plainly. If you start interfering in our marriage again, if you make disrespectful comments about my background, or if you try to manipulate family situations to get your way, there need to be clear consequences that you understand in advance. Michael shifted beside me, and I could tell he was surprised by how directly I was approaching this. But I had learned from watching too many families struggle with addiction and manipulation that boundaries without consequences were just suggestions. What kind of consequences are you thinking about? David asked, speaking up for the first time in the session. Limited contact, I said simply. If Patricia chooses to return to manipulative behavior, then Michael and I will limit our contact with her until she demonstrates that she's recommitted to healthy patterns. That might mean missing family gatherings, not being involved in major life decisions, or not having unsupervised access to our future children. The last point hit Patricia hard, and I saw her face crumple slightly. Future children? Yes, Michael said, speaking up for the first time in the session. Sarah and I want to have children, and we need to know that they'll be safe from the kind of manipulation and emotional drama that we've experienced. If you can show us that you've genuinely changed, then you'll be a welcome part of their lives. If not, then we'll limit your access to protect them. This was clearly difficult for Patricia to hear, but it was also the reality of the situation. I had seen too many families where toxic patterns continued because there were never any real consequences for harmful behavior. I understand, Patricia said quietly. I don't like it, but I understand why you feel that way. Dr. Walsh looked pleased with the direction of the conversation. These kinds of clear boundaries are exactly what healthy families need. Patricia, how do you feel about committing to these terms? Patricia was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the idea of having limits placed on her relationship with Michael. But finally, she nodded. I agree to those terms. I also want to add something else. She looked directly at me for the first time since the session began. I want to make up for ruining your wedding. I know I can't give you back that day, but I'd like to do something to show that I support your marriage. I was curious about what she had in mind, but also cautious. Patricia's gestures in the past had often come with strings attached or hidden agendas. What did you have in mind? I asked. I want to pay for you to have another ceremony, Patricia said. A vow renewal or a second celebration, whatever you want. I'll cover all the costs, and I'll help plan it according to your wishes, not mine. This was unexpected, and I could see that even David and Michael were surprised by the offer. It was a generous gesture, but I needed to think about whether accepting it would help or complicate our relationship going forward. That's a thoughtful offer, I said carefully. Can I have some time to discuss it with Michael and think about what would be most helpful for us? Of course, Patricia said quickly. And Sarah, I want you to know that the offer comes with no strings attached. If you decide you don't want another ceremony, or if you want one but would prefer to plan it without my involvement, I'll respect that decision. Dr. Walsh smiled. Patricia, that's an excellent example of respecting boundaries while still expressing your desire to make amends. The session continued for another 30 minutes, covering practical issues like how family gatherings would work going forward and what communication patterns would be healthiest for everyone. By the time we left, I felt cautiously optimistic that real change might be possible. As Michael and I drove home, we talked through what had happened in the session. I'm proud of how you handled that, Michael said. You were firm but fair, and you didn't let her off the hook for what she did. It's going to take time to see if she really follows through, I replied. But I have to admit, she seemed genuinely committed to changing. What do you think about her offer to pay for another ceremony? Michael asked. I had been thinking about that throughout the drive home. Actually, I think I want to take her up on it, but not in the way she's expecting. Michael glanced at me curiously. What do you mean? I want to have a vow renewal ceremony, but I want to plan it entirely ourselves, the way we wanted our original wedding to be. No interference, no suggestions, no attempts to modify our choices. She can pay for it as promised, but she gets to be a guest, not a planner. Michael grinned. I love that idea. It would give us the celebration we actually wanted, and it would be a good test of whether she can really respect our boundaries. Over the next 2 months, we planned our vow renewal ceremony for the following spring. True to her word, Patricia paid for everything without attempting to influence any of our decisions. When she didn't like our choice of venue, she kept her opinions to herself. When we decided to have a smaller, more intimate celebration with just close family and friends, she accepted the guest list without complaint. When we chose to emphasize the cultural fusion elements even more strongly than we had in our original plans, she asked thoughtful questions about the traditions, instead of dismissing them. The transformation wasn't perfect or complete. Patricia still occasionally slipped into old patterns of wanting to control situations, but she was learning to catch herself and correct course. More importantly, Michael was getting better at setting boundaries with his mother, and our marriage was growing stronger as we faced these challenges together. The vow renewal ceremony took place on a beautiful Saturday in April at a small garden venue in downtown Riverside. This time, there were no dramatic medical emergencies, no last-minute attempts to change the decorations, and no prescription drug-fueled anxiety attacks. Patricia sat in the front row wearing an appropriate navy blue dress, smiling genuinely as Michael and I exchanged new vows that we had written together. 6 months ago, we promised to love each other through every challenge, I said, looking into Michael's eyes as our smaller group of family and friends listened. We had no idea that we would face our first major test before we even left the altar. But we did face it, together, and were stronger because of it. Michael's vows focused on the lessons he had learned about standing up for our relationship and setting healthy boundaries with family members who couldn't respect our choices. I promise to continue putting our marriage first, he said, while still loving and supporting our families in healthy ways. When we kissed after exchanging rings for the second time, I felt a completeness that had been missing from our original wedding day. This time, there were no undercurrents of family tension, no worries about what drama might unfold, no prescription drug abuse lurking beneath the surface of family interactions. At the reception, Patricia approached me during a quiet moment between dances. Sarah, I want to thank you for giving me the chance to be part of this day. Thank you for respecting our boundaries and following through on your commitments, I replied. It means a lot to see you supporting our marriage instead of fighting against it. I'm learning that supporting Michael's happiness is more important than controlling his choices, Patricia said. It's not easy for me, but Dr. Walsh is helping me understand that love sometimes means letting go. As the evening continued, I watched Patricia interacting with my parents and relatives. She was making genuine efforts to learn about Chinese traditions, asking respectful questions about our family history, and even complimenting my mother on her traditional dress. The contrast with her behavior 6 months earlier was remarkable. During the father-daughter dance, my dad surprised me by commenting on the changes he had observed. That woman is doing real work to change herself, he said as we swayed to the music. I didn't think it was possible, but she's proving me wrong. People can change when they're forced to face consequences for their behavior, I replied. But it takes courage to admit when you're wrong, and commitment to do the hard work of changing. As Michael and I left the reception that night, driving away to the honeymoon in Hawaii that we had postponed after the original wedding disaster, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past 6 months. Patricia's fake heart attack had exposed her prescription drug abuse, which had led to therapy and real changes in family dynamics. What she had intended as a way to sabotage our wedding had ultimately forced her to confront her own issues and learn healthier ways of relating to our marriage. More importantly, Michael and I had learned that we could face serious challenges together and come out stronger on the other side. We had established boundaries with his family, developed better communication patterns, and proven to ourselves that our marriage could withstand external pressures. The irony wasn't lost on me that Patricia's attempt to ruin our wedding had actually given us some of the most valuable gifts possible: a stronger marriage, healthier family relationships, and the confidence that we could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. As our plane took off for Honolulu the next morning, I looked down at the city of Riverside where we had built our life together. Somewhere down there, Patricia was continuing her therapy sessions, learning to cope with anxiety in healthy ways, and hopefully discovering that she could love her son without controlling his life. David was learning to support his wife's recovery while also standing up to her manipulative behavior. Emma was going to college with a better understanding of healthy relationship patterns. And Michael and I were finally beginning the honeymoon phase of our marriage, 6 months after we had originally planned it. We had survived family drama, prescription drug abuse, a faked heart attack, months of therapy, and the challenge of rebuilding trust and respect in our family relationships. But most importantly, we had learned that love isn't just about the happy moments and romantic gestures. Real love is about facing the difficult moments together, setting boundaries that protect your relationship, and refusing to let other people's issues derail your happiness. As I settled back in my airplane seat, Michael's hand in mine and our matching wedding rings catching the sunlight through the window, I smiled thinking about how different this honeymoon felt from the one we had originally planned. We weren't naive newlyweds anymore, hoping that love would be enough to overcome any obstacle. We were experienced partners who had already proven that we could handle serious challenges together. Patricia's fake heart attack had been meant to derail our marriage before it could really begin. Instead, it had given us the opportunity to build something stronger and more resilient than we ever could have imagined. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, and after everything we had been through, Michael and I were definitely living very well indeed. 2 years later, I stood in the same emergency room where Patricia's deception had been exposed, but this time I was there as the newly promoted emergency department supervisor. The promotion had come after a year of exemplary performance reviews and successful completion of my master's degree in nursing administration. As I reviewed the night shift reports, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed since that chaotic December day when my wedding had been derailed by a fake heart attack. The irony of my career advancement wasn't lost on me. Patricia's prescription drug abuse crisis had inadvertently connected me with Dr. Walsh, who had recommended me for a leadership development program at the hospital. My ability to handle family crisis situations while maintaining professional boundaries had impressed the hospital administration, leading to opportunities I might never have discovered otherwise. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Mom wants to know if we can move Sunday dinner to Saturday this week. Emma's bringing her new boyfriend to meet the family." I smiled as I typed back my response. The fact that Patricia was asking through Michael, instead of trying to manipulate the situation herself, showed real progress. Family dinners had become a monthly tradition that actually worked for everyone, something I never would have believed possible 2 years ago. Dr. Amanda Brooks approached my desk with a patient chart, interrupting my thoughts. "Sarah, we've got a situation in room 7 that might interest you. 50-something woman claims she's having chest pains, but her presentation is inconsistent with cardiac symptoms. Her daughter is insisting she's been acting strangely for weeks." I followed Dr. Brooks to room 7, where a woman roughly Patricia's age was lying on the examination table, while her adult daughter paced nervously beside the bed. The scene was eerily familiar, though this time I was observing as a supervisor rather than as a bride in a wedding dress. "Mrs. Chen, can you describe your symptoms for me?" I asked, automatically falling into my assessment routine. "Sharp pains in my chest," the woman replied, but her eyes were unfocused and her speech slightly slurred. "Started about an hour ago." Her daughter stepped forward, clearly distressed. "She's been acting weird for months. Forgetful, mood swings, sleeping all the time. Today she collapsed at home, but something doesn't feel right about this." As Dr. Brooks ran through the standard cardiac protocols, I found myself thinking about the patterns I had learned to recognize. The daughter's concerns about behavioral changes, the inconsistent symptom presentation, the timing of the collapse during a family gathering. It all felt familiar. "Has your mother been prescribed any new medications recently?" I asked the daughter. "That's just it," the daughter replied. "She says her doctor gave her something for anxiety, but when I called the office to check, They said she hasn't been seen in over 6 months. Dr. Brooks and I exchanged glances. We ordered the same comprehensive blood panel that had exposed Patricia's prescription drug abuse. And sure enough, the results showed elevated levels of multiple controlled substances that weren't prescribed to the patient. As we worked with the family to address the situation and connect them with appropriate treatment resources, I realized how much my experience with Patricia had shaped my ability to recognize and handle similar cases. What had started as personal family drama had actually made me a better nurse and supervisor. After Mrs. Chen was stabilized and admitted for further evaluation, I returned to my office to find an unexpected visitor waiting for me. Patricia sat in one of my chairs, looking nervous but determined. She was dressed professionally in a navy blue suit, her hair styled simply, and she carried a manila folder in her hands. "Patricia, this is a surprise," I said, settling behind my desk. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," she replied quickly. "I actually came to talk to you about something professional. I know you're busy, so I won't take much of your time." I gestured for her to continue, curious about what had brought her to my office. "I've been volunteering at the Addiction Recovery Center for the past year," Patricia began, "and I've been thinking about doing more. Dr. Walsh suggested that I might be able to help other families who are dealing with prescription drug abuse." She opened the manila folder and pulled out several documents. "I've been working on developing a support group specifically for family members of people struggling with prescription drug addiction. I have the basic framework ready, but I need a medical professional to review the materials and potentially serve as an advisor." I was genuinely surprised by this development. "You want me to review your support group materials?" "I know it might seem strange asking you to help with something related to the problems I caused for our family," Patricia said. "But you understand both the medical aspects and the family dynamics better than anyone I know. You've seen how prescription drug abuse affects everyone, not just the person taking the medications." I accepted the folder and began reviewing the materials she had prepared. The documents were well-researched and thoughtfully organized, covering topics like recognizing signs of prescription drug abuse, setting healthy boundaries with family members in recovery, and resources for family therapy and support. "Patricia, this is impressive work," I said honestly. "You've clearly put a lot of thought and research into this." "I want to help other families avoid what we went through," she replied. "I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but maybe I can prevent other mothers from making the same mistakes I did." As I continued reading through her materials, I was struck by how thoroughly she had examined her own behavior and its impact on our family. There were sections about the ways prescription drug abuse could escalate family conflicts, the importance of professional treatment, and strategies for rebuilding trust after betraying family members. "There's one section I specifically wanted your input on," Patricia continued, pointing to a particular page. "It's about how family members can support someone in recovery without enabling them. I've written it from my perspective, but I think it needs a medical professional's viewpoint as well." I read through the section, which detailed Patricia's own recovery process and the ways our family had learned to set healthy boundaries. Her writing was honest about the mistakes she had made and the work she was still doing to maintain her recovery. "This is really good, Patricia," I said, looking up from the documents. "You've captured the complexity of family dynamics during addiction recovery really well. I'd be happy to provide medical input and serve as an advisor for the support group." Patricia's relief was visible. "Thank you, Sarah. I wasn't sure if you'd be willing to work with me on this, given our history." "Our history is exactly why I think this could be valuable," I replied. "We've been through the worst of this kind of situation, and we've found a way to build something healthier. If we can help other families do the same thing, then maybe some good can come from what we experienced." Over the next several months, Patricia and I worked together to refine her support group materials and launch the program at the Recovery Center. It was strange at first, collaborating professionally with someone who had caused so much chaos in my personal life, but Patricia's commitment to helping others was genuine, and her insights were valuable. The support group launched successfully, with several families participating in the weekly meetings. Patricia facilitated the discussions while I provided medical education sessions about prescription drug abuse and addiction. Watching her work with other families, I could see how much she had changed from the manipulative woman who had faked a heart attack at my wedding. During one particularly powerful session, a mother broke down crying as she described finding unprescribed medications in her adult son's bedroom. Patricia listened with genuine empathy, then shared her own story about the fear and anxiety that had driven her to abuse prescription drugs. "I convinced myself that I was protecting my family," Patricia told the group, "but I was actually putting everyone at risk. The medications made my anxiety worse, not better, and they clouded my judgment about what was really important." After the session, the crying mother approached Patricia privately. "Thank you for sharing your story. It helps to know that someone else has been through this and come out the other side." Watching this interaction, I realized that Patricia had found a way to transform her worst mistakes into something that could help others. Her willingness to be vulnerable about her struggles and her commitment to preventing other families from experiencing similar trauma showed real growth and maturity. Meanwhile, my own career continued to flourish. The leadership skills I had developed through navigating family crisis, setting boundaries, and maintaining professional standards during personal upheaval had prepared me well for management responsibilities. I was selected to represent our hospital at a national conference on emergency medicine, where I presented research on identifying and treating prescription drug abuse in emergency department settings. The research was based partly on the case studies I had observed, including Patricia's situation, though all identifying information was removed to protect patient privacy. The presentation was well received, and several other hospitals requested copies of our protocols for handling similar cases. Michael and I also reached some major milestones in our personal lives. We bought our first house, a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood near both our workplaces. We hosted our first Thanksgiving dinner, successfully bringing together both our families without any dramatic incidents. Most significantly, we started seriously discussing starting a family of our own. "I think we're ready," Michael said one evening as we sat on our back porch, planning the garden we wanted to plant in the spring. "We've proven that we can handle crisis situations together, we've established healthy boundaries with our families, and we're both in good places professionally." I agreed, feeling confident that we had built a strong foundation for raising children. The challenges we had faced with Patricia had actually strengthened our communication skills and taught us valuable lessons about protecting our family unit while still maintaining relationships with extended family. When we announced our pregnancy 6 months later, Patricia's reaction was everything I could have hoped for. Instead of immediately trying to take control of the situation or offering unsolicited advice, she asked thoughtful questions about how she could be helpful and what boundaries we wanted to establish as new parents. "I want to be the kind of grandmother who supports you as parents, not one who undermines your decisions," Patricia told us during a family dinner. "I know I have to earn that trust, and I'm committed to continuing the work I've been doing in therapy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Patricia demonstrated her commitment to healthy boundaries throughout the 9 months. When I was put on bed rest during the final month, she offered to help with household tasks but accepted gracefully when I said Michael and I preferred to handle things ourselves. When we decided not to find out the baby's gender in advance, she didn't push for information or try to convince us to change our minds. Labor and delivery went well, and our daughter Elena was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in September. As I held her for the first time, I thought about all the challenges Michael and I had overcome to reach this moment. The fake heart attack that had disrupted our wedding now seemed like ancient history, just one of many obstacles we had navigated together on our way to building the family we wanted. Patricia's first meeting with her granddaughter was everything it should have been. She waited until we invited her to visit, brought a thoughtful gift that we had specifically requested, and focused entirely on celebrating Elena rather than trying to take charge of the situation. "She's beautiful," Patricia said softly, tears in her eyes as she held Elena for the first time. "Thank you for trusting me to be part of her life." Watching Patricia with our daughter, I could see genuine transformation. The manipulative woman who had faked a medical emergency to sabotage our wedding had become a grandmother who respected boundaries, supported our parenting decisions, and contributed positively to our family dynamic. As Elena grew from infant to toddler, Patricia continued to demonstrate her commitment to healthy relationships. She babysat when we asked her to, but didn't pressure us for more time with Elena than we were comfortable with. She offered advice when requested, but didn't criticize our parenting choices when we made different decisions than she would have made. Most importantly, she never tried to undermine our authority as parents or create conflicts between Elena and us. The support group Patricia had started continued to grow and help families throughout the community. Her collaboration with medical professionals had expanded beyond just working with me, and she had become a recognized advocate for family recovery programs. Watching her speak at community events about prescription drug abuse prevention, I was amazed by how she had channeled her personal experience into meaningful service to others. During Elena's second birthday party, held in our backyard with both families present, I took a moment to observe the scene around me. Patricia was playing quietly with Elena and her cousins, respecting the boundaries we had set while clearly enjoying her time as a grandmother. David was helping Michael with the grilling, the two men having developed a strong friendship over the years. My parents were chatting comfortably with Michael's relatives. The cultural differences that had once seemed so important, now barely noticeable. Emma, now graduated from college and working as a social worker, approached me as I stood watching the family gathering. "It's amazing how different everything is now," she said, following my gaze. "I honestly didn't think Mom would ever change." "People can change when they're forced to face real consequences and do the hard work of examining their behavior," I replied. "But it takes courage and commitment, and not everyone is willing to do it." "You and Michael handled it perfectly," Emma continued. "You set clear boundaries, followed through on consequences, but also gave her the chance to prove she could change. A lot of people would have just cut her off completely." I considered Emma's words as the party continued around us. Cutting Patricia off completely would have been easier in some ways, but it also would have meant missing out on the woman she had become through recovery and personal growth. More importantly, it would have deprived Elena of a grandmother who had learned valuable lessons about love, respect, and healthy relationships. As the sun set and our guests began to leave, Michael and I cleaned up together while Elena napped in her room. "Good party," Michael said, wrapping his arms around me as we surveyed our backyard. "The best part is how normal it felt," I replied. "No drama, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells, just family enjoying time together." "Hard to believe it's been 3 years since the wedding disaster," Michael mused. "Sometimes I think that was the best thing that could have happened to us." I understood what he meant. Patricia's fake heart attack had forced our family to confront issues that might have festered for years otherwise. It had given Michael and me the opportunity to establish ourselves as a strong, united couple from the very beginning of our marriage. Most importantly, it had led to real healing and growth for everyone involved. Later that evening, as I tucked Elena into her crib and watched her sleep peacefully, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. What had started as one of the worst days of my life, my wedding day, disrupted by a fake medical emergency, had ultimately led to some of the best outcomes I could have imagined. I had a career that I loved and was advancing in, a marriage built on strong communication and mutual respect, a healthy relationship with my extended family, and a beautiful daughter who would grow up seeing what healthy family dynamics looked like. Patricia had found a way to transform her mistakes into service to others, and our entire family had learned valuable lessons about setting boundaries, facing consequences, and doing the hard work of personal growth. As I turned off Elena's bedroom light and headed toward my own room, where Michael was already reading in bed, I smiled thinking about how far we had all come. Patricia's attempt to sabotage our wedding with a fake heart attack had ended up being the catalyst for building the strong, healthy family that we had today. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives turn out to be the beginning of our greatest triumphs. Patricia Rodriguez had tried to ruin my wedding day, but instead, she had given me the opportunity to prove that love, boundaries, and determination could overcome even the most challenging family drama. The fake heart attack had exposed her prescription drug abuse, which led to treatment and real change. The family crisis had strengthened my marriage and advanced my career. The consequences we had established had motivated genuine transformation in someone I had thought was incapable of change. 3 years later, as I settled into bed next to my husband in the house we had bought together, with our daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall and a family support system that actually supported us, I felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. Even fake heart attacks, it turned out, could lead to real healing when handled with courage, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to building something better. 5 years had passed since Patricia's dramatic collapse during my wedding ceremony, and I found myself standing in the conference room of Riverside General Medical Center, preparing to deliver the keynote address at the National Emergency Medicine Conference. The irony wasn't lost on me that the crisis which had nearly destroyed my wedding day was now the foundation for research that would help thousands of families across the country. The conference room was packed with emergency medicine professionals from hospitals nationwide, all gathered to hear about our groundbreaking protocol for identifying and treating prescription drug abuse in emergency department settings. As I adjusted my presentation slides, I caught sight of Patricia in the audience, wearing her volunteer coordinator badge from the recovery center. She had driven 3 hours to attend my presentation, a gesture that would have seemed impossible during those early days of our relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, addressing the audience of doctors, nurses, and hospital administrators. 5 years ago, a family crisis taught me that emergency medicine isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about recognizing the complex human stories behind those symptoms and having the courage to address root causes, even when they're uncomfortable or complicated. I clicked to my first slide, which showed statistics about prescription drug abuse in emergency departments. Today I want to share with you a protocol that has revolutionized how we approach suspected prescription drug abuse cases at Riverside General, leading to a 60% increase in successful interventions and family recovery outcomes. As I walked through the presentation, explaining the medical indicators we had learned to identify and the family support systems we had developed, I found myself thinking about the personal journey that had led to this professional achievement. Patricia's fake heart attack had exposed not just her own prescription drug abuse, but had opened my eyes to how many families were struggling with similar issues in silence. The protocol we had developed incorporated medical assessment, family education, and immediate connection to treatment resources. Most importantly, it recognized that prescription drug abuse was often a symptom of deeper family dysfunction and required comprehensive intervention rather than just medical treatment. The key insight, I explained to the audience, is that prescription drug abuse rarely occurs in isolation. It's often connected to family stress, untreated mental health issues, and patterns of manipulation or control within family systems. Our protocol addresses not just the medical emergency, but the underlying family dynamics that contributed to the crisis. During the question and answer session, a doctor from Chicago asked about long-term outcomes for families who had gone through our intervention protocol. I was able to share data showing that families who completed our comprehensive program had significantly lower rates of recurring emergency department visits related to prescription drug abuse. We've also seen positive secondary effects, I added. Families report improved communication, stronger boundaries, and better overall mental health outcomes. The crisis becomes a catalyst for positive change rather than just a medical emergency to be treated and forgotten. After my presentation, several colleagues approached me to discuss implementing similar protocols at their hospitals. Patricia waited patiently until the professional conversations concluded, then approached with a smile that reflected genuine pride. "Sarah, that was incredible," she said. "To think that our family's worst crisis became the foundation for helping so many others. It's almost like it was meant to happen this way." I appreciated Patricia's perspective, though I knew the positive outcomes had required deliberate choices and hard work from everyone involved. Your willingness to turn your recovery into service to others has been a huge part of making this program successful, I acknowledged. The support group you facilitate has become a model for other recovery centers. Patricia's recovery support group had indeed grown beyond anything either of us had initially envisioned. What had started as a small weekly meeting for family members affected by prescription drug abuse had evolved into a comprehensive program offering education, counseling, and advocacy services. Patricia had become a sought-after speaker at medical conferences and community events, sharing her story to help other families recognize and address prescription drug abuse before it reached crisis levels. The drive home from the conference gave me time to reflect on how dramatically my life had changed since that chaotic December wedding day. I was now the director of emergency services at Riverside General, overseeing a department that had become a regional leader in addiction intervention and family crisis support. Michael had been promoted to principal at his elementary school, where he had implemented innovative programs for supporting children from families affected by addiction. Most importantly, our family had grown in ways that filled me with joy and gratitude. Elena, now 5 years old, was a confident, curious child who had never known family dynamics characterized by manipulation or crisis. Our son David, named after Michael's father, was 2 years old and already showing signs of the same strong will that had helped me navigate the challenges with Patricia. Both children adored their grandmother Patricia, but their relationship with her was healthy and appropriate. She respected our parenting decisions, supported our family rules, and never tried to undermine our authority or create conflicts. The children saw her as a loving grandmother, who also did important work helping other families, giving them an early example of how people could transform difficult experiences into service to others. As I pulled into our driveway, I could see Michael in the backyard with both children, teaching Elena how to tend the vegetable garden we had planted together. David was toddling around with a small watering can, more interested in splashing himself than actually watering the plants. The scene filled me with contentment and reminded me of how far we had come as a family. "How was the conference?" Michael asked, wrapping me in a hug as the children ran over to greet me. "Incredible," I replied, picking up David while Elena chattered excitedly about the tomatoes she had helped harvest. "The response to our protocol was even better than I expected. Several hospitals want to implement it, and I think we might be able to secure federal funding to expand the program nationally." Quote, "That's amazing," Michael said, his pride evident. "Your mom would be so proud of what you've accomplished." My mother had passed away the previous year after a brief illness, but not before seeing me receive recognition for my work in emergency medicine and addiction intervention. Her final words to me had been about how proud she was that I had turned a family crisis into something that helped others, and how impressed she was with the way Michael and I had built such a strong marriage despite the early challenges. That evening, as we sat around our dinner table with Patricia and David joining us for our weekly family meal, I looked around at the people who had become my chosen family. Patricia had prepared one of her traditional Mexican dishes, but she had also learned to make several Chinese recipes that honored my heritage. The conversation flowed easily between topics ranging from Elena's upcoming kindergarten graduation to David's latest walking adventures to Patricia's plans for expanding the recovery support program. "I have some news to share," Patricia announced as we finished dinner. "The state health department has offered funding to expand our family recovery programs statewide. They want to use our model as the template for addiction support services across California." The announcement was met with excitement and congratulations from everyone around the table. Patricia's transformation from a manipulative woman who had faked a heart attack to sabotage our wedding into a respected advocate for family recovery was nothing short of remarkable. "I need to ask for some advice," Patricia continued, looking directly at me. "The state program would require me to travel extensively for training and consultation. I want to make sure this won't interfere with my time with the grandchildren or my commitments to our family." This request for input, rather than simply announcing a decision that would affect everyone, demonstrated how much Patricia had learned about respecting boundaries and considering the impact of her choices on others. The woman who had once tried to control every aspect of Michael's life now consistently sought input and respected our family's priorities. "I think it's a wonderful opportunity," I replied. "Elena and David are old enough now to understand that Grandma has important work helping other families. And the travel schedule seems manageable for maintaining our regular family time." Michael nodded in agreement. "We're proud of the work you're doing, Mom. This expansion could help thousands of families avoid what we went through." As the evening concluded and Patricia prepared to leave, she pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Sarah, I want to thank you again for not giving up on me. I know there were times when it would have been easier to cut me out of your lives completely." "Accountability and consequences don't mean abandonment," I replied. "You did the hard work of changing, and you've proven that people can genuinely transform when they're willing to face their mistakes and do better." "I still think about that day at your wedding sometimes," Patricia admitted. "How desperate and out of control I was, how much damage I could have caused to everyone's relationships. I'm grateful that the crisis forced me to get help instead of just getting away with the manipulation." After Patricia left, Michael and I tucked the children into bed and settled on our couch to discuss the day's events. The house was quiet and peaceful, filled with evidence of the life we had built together. Family photos showing graduations and birthdays and holidays, children's artwork covering the refrigerator, books and toys scattered in corners from active family life. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if your mom hadn't had that breakdown at our wedding?" I asked Michael. "All the time," he replied thoughtfully. "I mean, obviously I wish our wedding day had gone as planned. But honestly, I think we might have struggled with her manipulation for years if she hadn't been forced to confront her behavior so dramatically. I agreed with his assessment. Patricia's prescription drug abuse and fake heart attack had created an unavoidable crisis that forced everyone to address problems that might otherwise have been ignored or minimized. The clear consequences we had established had motivated genuine change, rather than just temporary improvement. Plus, Michael continued, you might never have discovered your passion for addiction medicine without going through that experience. How many families have been helped because you understood both the medical and family dynamics sides of prescription drug abuse? Over the following months, I watched Patricia successfully launch the statewide family recovery program while maintaining her commitments to our family and her personal recovery. The program's success led to national attention, with other states requesting consultation on implementing similar initiatives. During one of her speaking engagements, Patricia was interviewed by a medical journal about her experience as both a family member affected by prescription drug abuse and a recovery advocate. The interviewer asked her what advice she would give to other family members who were struggling with similar issues. The most important thing I learned, Patricia replied, is that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. My daughter-in-law Sarah taught me that genuine care for family members means holding them accountable for their behavior and insisting on healthy relationships, even when that's difficult or uncomfortable. Reading the interview later, I was struck by how accurately Patricia had understood the lessons from our early conflicts. Setting clear boundaries and following through on consequences had been difficult for everyone involved, but it had ultimately created the foundation for authentic, healthy relationships. As Elena prepared to start first grade, and David became an increasingly active toddler, Michael and I began discussing whether we wanted to expand our family further. The decision felt different this time, because we were confident that any additional children would grow up in a stable, supportive family environment where healthy boundaries were respected and maintained. I think we could handle one more, Michael said one evening as we watched our children playing together in the backyard. Elena is such a good big sister, and we've got the family support systems in place now. I agreed, feeling grateful for how secure our family foundation had become. The crisis that had nearly destroyed our wedding day had ultimately taught us invaluable lessons about building strong relationships, managing family dynamics, and turning difficult experiences into opportunities for growth and service. When we announced our third pregnancy the following spring, the family celebration was everything it should have been. Patricia was genuinely excited and supportive, offering help in appropriate ways while respecting our decisions about how we wanted to manage the pregnancy and prepare for the new baby. Elena and David were thrilled about becoming big siblings, and their enthusiasm reminded me of how much our family had grown in both size and strength since those early days of marriage, when Patricia's behavior had threatened to tear us apart. The baby, another daughter we named Sophia, was born on a beautiful October morning. As I held her for the first time, with Michael beside me and our older children waiting excitedly to meet their new sister, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment of pure happiness. Patricia's visit to meet Sophia was perfect in every way. She waited until we invited her, brought a thoughtful gift that we had specifically requested, and focused entirely on celebrating our new daughter rather than trying to take control of the situation. Watching her hold Sophia while Elena and David clustered around to see their new sister, I marveled at how completely our family dynamics had transformed. Later that day, as Patricia prepared to leave the hospital, she stopped to speak with me privately. Sarah, I know I say this often, but I need you to know how grateful I am for the family we've built together. Not just the forgiveness, but the way you've helped all of us learn to love each other better. We've all done the work together, I replied. The most important thing is that we never stopped believing that change was possible, even when it seemed impossible. As Patricia left the hospital room, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation our family had undergone. What had started as one of the most humiliating and frustrating experiences of my life, having my wedding disrupted by a fake medical emergency, had become the foundation for a stronger marriage, a more authentic family, and a career that allowed me to help thousands of other families facing similar challenges. The fake heart attack that was supposed to sabotage our marriage had instead revealed Patricia's need for help, forced our family to develop healthy communication patterns, and created opportunities for growth that none of us could have imagined. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the catalysts for our greatest triumphs, but only when we have the courage to face difficult truths and do the hard work of building something better. Holding Sophia while watching Michael interact with Elena and David, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the family we had created together. Patricia's attempt to control our wedding day had ultimately taught us that real love means supporting each other's growth, respecting boundaries, and building relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation or control. The woman who had once faked a heart attack to disrupt our wedding ceremony was now one of our strongest family supporters and a nationally recognized advocate for family recovery. Her transformation proved that people can genuinely change when they face real consequences and commit to doing the difficult work of personal growth. As the sun set outside our hospital window and our new family of 5 settled into our first evening together, I smiled, thinking about how much we had all overcome to reach this moment of perfect contentment. Patricia Rodriguez had tried to ruin my wedding day with a fake heart attack, but instead, she had given us the opportunity to build something stronger and more beautiful than any of us had ever imagined possible. The emergency that was supposed to end our happiness had become the beginning of our greatest joys. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, and after everything we had been through together, the Rodriguez family was living very well indeed. 10 years after the wedding incident that changed everything, I stood in the lobby of the newly constructed Rodriguez Family Recovery Center, watching as hundreds of people gathered for the grand opening ceremony. The building was beautiful, modern yet warm, with large windows that let in natural light and artwork created by families who had participated in recovery programs. What struck me most was seeing Patricia at the podium, addressing the crowd with confidence and genuine purpose. This center exists because sometimes our greatest failures can become our most meaningful contributions, Patricia said into the microphone, her voice steady and clear. 10 years ago, I made choices that hurt the people I loved most. Today, those experiences have helped create a place where other families can find healing and hope. The crowd included state officials, medical professionals, and dozens of families who had been helped by the programs Patricia had developed over the past decade. Watching from the back of the room, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in what our family had accomplished together, amazement at how completely Patricia had transformed, and deep satisfaction that something so positive had emerged from such a painful beginning. Michael stood beside me, our 3 children arranged between us. Elena, now 15 and preparing for high school, had volunteered at the recovery center throughout middle school and was considering a career in social work. David, 12 years old and showing Michael's natural teaching abilities, had started a peer support group at his school for kids whose families were affected by addiction. Sophia, now 10, was the family artist whose drawings decorated Patricia's office and brought smiles to families going through difficult times. As Patricia continued her speech, sharing statistics about the center's success rates and the families they had helped, I remembered the frightened, desperate woman who had collapsed during our wedding ceremony. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and there had been setbacks along the way, but Patricia's commitment to change had never wavered. The Rodriguez family taught me that real love means holding people accountable while still believing in their capacity for growth, Patricia continued, catching my eye across the room. My daughter-in-law Sarah showed me that professional boundaries and personal compassion aren't contradictory. They're both essential for creating healthy relationships and effective healing. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed throughout the building for tours of the various program areas. There was a medical clinic staffed by emergency medicine specialists trained in addiction intervention, counseling offices designed to feel welcoming rather than clinical, and meeting rooms where support groups gathered daily. The children's area was particularly impressive, offering services for young people whose lives had been affected by family addiction issues. Dr. Amanda Brooks, who had become the center's medical director after years of collaboration on addiction protocols, approached me as I examined the family education materials displayed in the lobby. "Sarah, it's incredible to see how far this has all come. When I first met Patricia in that emergency room, I never would have imagined she'd become one of the most effective recovery advocates in the state." "She put in the work," I replied, still amazed by the journey myself. "But it took a crisis to force her to confront what needed to change." Sometimes people have to lose everything before they're willing to build something better. The center represented more than just Patricia's personal recovery and professional development. It had become a model for family-centered addiction treatment that was being studied and replicated across the country. The approach we had developed, which addressed both medical and family relationship aspects of prescription drug abuse, had proven more effective than traditional treatment methods that focused only on the individual with the addiction. During the tour, I stopped by Patricia's office, which was decorated with photos spanning the past decade. There were pictures from Elena's quinceañera, David's graduation from elementary school, Sophia's dance recitals, and various family vacations and celebrations. But there were also photos from her speaking engagements, awards she had received for her advocacy work, and letters from families who had been helped by her programs. "It's surreal sometimes," Patricia said, joining me as I looked at the wall of memories. "Seeing evidence of the life I've built since hitting rock bottom. I keep these photos to remind myself that change is possible and that the work we do here really matters." "What's the most important lesson you've learned over these 10 years?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective on the journey. Patricia considered the question carefully. "That accountability and love aren't opposites. For most of my life, I thought love meant protecting people from consequences or trying to control situations to prevent problems. But real love means trusting people to learn and grow from their mistakes, even when that's difficult to watch." She gestured toward a photo of our family at Sophia's baptism, where she was holding her granddaughter with obvious joy and pride. "You and Michael taught me that I could be part of the family without controlling it. That my role as a mother and grandmother wasn't to manage everyone's choices, but to support them and love them while they made their own decisions." As the day continued, I had the opportunity to meet several families who were currently participating in programs at the center. Their stories varied, but the theme was consistent. Addiction had created chaos and broken trust in their relationships, but the comprehensive approach to treatment was helping them rebuild on healthier foundations. One mother, whose adult son had struggled with prescription drug abuse, similar to Patricia's situation, approached me during the reception following the opening ceremony. "Mrs. Rodriguez told me that your family went through something similar to what we're experiencing now. Can I ask how you managed to keep your relationship with her while still setting boundaries?" The question took me back to those early days when Michael and I were learning to navigate the complex balance between supporting Patricia's recovery and protecting our own family's well-being. "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "There were times when we had to limit contact because her behavior was harmful. But we never gave up on the possibility that she could change. We just made it clear that change was required for full participation in our family." "How did you know when it was safe to trust her again?" the woman asked. "We looked for consistent behavior over time, not just words or promises," I replied. Patricia had to demonstrate through her actions, month after month, that she was committed to healthy relationships. And even now, 10 years later, we maintain certain boundaries because they work for everyone. The conversation reminded me of how carefully Michael and I had navigated those early years of Patricia's recovery. We had celebrated her progress while remaining vigilant about backsliding, supported her growth while protecting our children from potential instability, and gradually rebuilt trust based on evidence rather than hope alone. That evening, our extended family gathered at Patricia and David's house for a private celebration of the center's opening. The dinner was a testament to how much our family dynamics had evolved. Patricia had prepared a meal that honored both Michael's Mexican heritage and my Chinese background. The children moved easily between English and Spanish in their conversations, and the entire atmosphere was one of genuine affection and mutual respect. "I want to make a toast," David said, raising his glass as we finished dinner. 10 years ago, our family went through the worst crisis we had ever experienced. Patricia's addiction nearly destroyed relationships that we all valued. But tonight, we're celebrating not just recovery, but transformation." He looked around the table at each of us. "Sarah and Michael, you showed us what it means to set loving boundaries. You held Patricia accountable, while never giving up on her capacity for change. Patricia, you did the hardest work of all, facing your mistakes and building something beautiful from the wreckage. To the Rodriguez family," David concluded, "for proving that our worst moments can become our greatest triumphs when we're willing to do the work of healing." As we raised our glasses together, I felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the family we had created through crisis and commitment. The children were growing up with a deep understanding of both the importance of personal responsibility and the power of forgiveness. They had seen firsthand that people could change dramatically when they were willing to face difficult truths and do the work of growth. Later, as Michael and I drove home with our children sleeping in the back seat, we talked about the day's events and what the future might hold for our family and the recovery center. "I never imagined when Mom collapsed at our wedding that it would lead to all this," Michael said, gesturing toward the folder of materials from the center that I was holding. "A nationally recognized treatment program, thousands of families helped, our kids growing up with such strong values about accountability and forgiveness." "Sometimes I think about parallel universes," I replied. "What would have happened if Patricia had just quietly disapproved of our marriage without the dramatic breakdown? Would she have continued the prescription drug abuse? Would we have spent years dealing with passive-aggressive manipulation? Would our kids have grown up thinking that was normal family behavior?" Michael nodded thoughtfully. "The crisis forced everything into the open where it could be addressed. Even though it was terrible at the time, it probably saved our family from years of dysfunction." As we pulled into our driveway, I looked at our house with its warm lights glowing in the windows and felt deep satisfaction with the life we had built together. The garden that Michael tended with the children was flourishing. The home office where I continued my research on addiction intervention was organized and productive, and every room held evidence of a family that had learned to love each other well. The next morning, I woke up to find Elena in the kitchen making breakfast for her younger siblings, a responsibility she had taken on as she prepared for increased independence in high school. Watching her gentle interaction with David and Sophia, I could see that she had absorbed the lessons about caring for family members while respecting their autonomy. "Mom, I've been thinking about something," Elena said as I joined them for breakfast. "I want to do my senior service project at Grandma Patricia's recovery center. I think I want to work with teenagers whose families are dealing with addiction." Her announcement didn't surprise me. Elena had been volunteering at the center since middle school and had often expressed interest in helping young people navigate family crises. What struck me was her mature understanding of how her own family's experience could be used to help others. "That sounds like a meaningful project," I replied. "What specific aspect of the work interests you most?" "I think teenagers need to understand that addiction isn't their fault, but that they still have choices about how they respond to it," Elena said thoughtfully. "Like how you and Dad showed Grandma Patricia that her actions had consequences, but you never stopped believing she could change." The conversation reminded me of how naturally our children had absorbed the complex lessons about accountability, boundaries, and forgiveness that had taken Michael and me years to fully understand. They had grown up seeing these principles in action rather than just hearing about them in theory. Over the following months, I watched Elena develop and implement her senior project, creating a support group for teenagers affected by family addiction. Patricia mentored her through the process, sharing insights from her years of recovery advocacy, while respecting Elena's independence and creativity. The program Elena developed was so successful that it became a permanent offering at the recovery center, with Elena training adult facilitators to continue the work after her graduation. Watching my 15-year-old daughter teach experienced counselors about effective approaches to teenage support was both pride-inducing and humbling. As Elena's high school graduation approached, Patricia asked if she could host a celebration dinner for the family. The request itself demonstrated how much she had changed over the years. Instead of assuming she would host or trying to take over the planning, she asked for permission and offered to organize the event according to our preferences. The graduation dinner was held in the community room at the recovery center, surrounded by evidence of the positive impact our family's crisis had generated. Elena gave a speech about her plans to study social work in college, crediting her family's experience with addiction and recovery for inspiring her career choice. 10 years ago, my grandmother made mistakes that could have destroyed our family, Elena said, looking directly at Patricia with obvious love and respect. Instead, those mistakes became the foundation for helping thousands of other families. That taught me that our worst moments don't have to define us if we're willing to learn from them and use them to help others. Listening to Elena speak, I realized that Patricia's fake heart attack at our wedding had become a family origin story that inspired rather than embarrassed us. What had once been a source of shame and conflict had transformed into a testament to the power of accountability, growth, and redemption. As the evening concluded and we prepared to leave the recovery center, Patricia pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Sarah, I need you to know that I consider these past 10 years to be the most meaningful of my life. Not because I'm proud of what I did to cause the crisis, but because I'm grateful for what we all built together afterward." "What do you hope for the next 10 years?" I asked. Patricia smiled, looking toward the future with obvious optimism. "I want to see Elena succeed in college and begin her career helping families. I want to watch David and Sophia discover their own passions and purposes. I want to continue growing the recovery center's impact. And I want to keep being the kind of grandmother and mother-in-law who adds value to your lives rather than creating problems." As we drove home that night with Elena in the passenger seat talking excitedly about her college plans and the younger children asleep in the back, I reflected on the extraordinary journey our family had traveled together. Patricia's prescription drug abuse and fake heart attack had nearly destroyed our wedding day, but they had also created the catalyst for building something stronger and more meaningful than any of us could have imagined. The woman who had once manipulated family situations to maintain control had become a nationally recognized advocate for healthy family relationships. The crisis that had threatened to tear us apart had instead taught us how to love each other better. And the worst day of our early marriage had ultimately led to some of our greatest triumphs as a family. 10 years later, I could honestly say that I was grateful for Patricia's fake heart attack, not because I enjoyed the crisis, but because of everything we had learned and built together in response to it. Sometimes the most destructive moments in our lives become the foundation for our most meaningful achievements, but only when we have the courage to face difficult truths and do the hard work of creating something better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.